Counting on You webinar titled Protect, Respond, Promote, How to Take an Integrated Approach to Workplace Wellbeing. Just before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which this webinar is being broadcast from and to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I would also like to acknowledge and welcome Whānau from Aotearoa who are here today. I also acknowledge people with lived experience of mental health and their carers, family and supporters. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Andrew NOBLET. I'm a co-founder of the Counting on You program. For those people who aren't aware, Counting on You is a mental health, workplace mental health training program that has registered over 4,000 participants so far and aims to better equip business finance professionals to support the mental and financial well-being of their clients. The program started as a research project for advisors of small business owners way back in 2021. It seems like a long time ago. And exciting news, we have just launched a commercial version of the program, and that's available to any business finance professional with a client-facing role. So if you or anyone you know is interested, please head to our website to be able to register. And our website, by the way, is you can find those details at the end of this slideshow, and the slideshow will be actually sent out to all attendees who are taking part in today's session. Now, just before we get started, I just want to let you know that we've set aside 10 minutes at the end of today's session for discussion on any audience questions. So please, if you've got any questions, just pop it into the Q&A box. It's anonymous. And depending on how we go or how many questions that we get, I may not have time to ask each one live. But if that's the case, then we'll make sure that we get a Deakin staff member in contact with you just to answer that question for you. So what are we here for here today? The focus of today's seminar is on how organisations, big and small, can prevent or reduce distress and burnout among their employees. And the big question is, where do you direct your efforts? What strategies are more likely to be effective, not just in terms of reducing poor mental health outcomes, such as burnout and distress, but also in terms of generating higher levels of satisfaction, motivation, fulfillment, and other positive mental health outcomes. In today's seminar, we've brought together a panel of experts to discuss what we refer to as the integrated approach to workplace health. This approach provides a framework for doing both. That is, for protecting people from excessive workloads, interpersonal conflict, harassment, and other situations and events that can harm and undermine their mental health, and at the same time promoting work practice that have a positive effect on employees, their families, and the community at large. The integrated approach to workplace mental health also highlights the need to look out for each other's mental health. And if we do see someone struggling, that we, both individually and collectively, have the capacity to respond to colleagues in need. So without ado, I'm now going to introduce you to each of our panelists. We have, first of all, Tony LAMONTAGNE, who is a professor of work, health and wellbeing at Deakin University, and whose research has influenced policy and practice in workplace health, both nationally and internationally, including the Australian National Mental Health Commission, the US Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and the World Health Organization. Tony is the architect of the integrated approach to workplace mental health, and so he'll be able to talk about the details of this framework in a much more comprehensive way than what I have. Next we have, by the way, thank you, Tony, for attending today and welcome. Next is Dr. Sarah Cotton. Sarah is an organisational psychologist and co-founder of Transitioning Well, a consultancy firm made up of psychologists working with individuals and workplaces across Australia and New Zealand to manage and thrive in the often messy and complex intersections between people's working and non-working lives. We know work-life balance is a hot topic at any time for many people, especially in the age of the hybrid workplace. And I'm really looking forward to hearing how an integrated approach to this issue can benefit both employees and the organisations within which they work. Welcome, Sarah.
Great, thanks, Andrew.
We have a second Sarah on board here today, and her name is Sarah LAWRANCE. Sarah LAWRANCE is the founder of Hot Toast accounting firm. Sarah is Australia's 2020 and 2019 CFO of the Year and has won Ignition's top 50 women in accounting 3 times, 2018, 2019, and 2021. She's also a Counting on You alumni Thank you, Sarah, for taking part in that program. And she's also a fellow of the CPA Australia. As the owner of an accounting firm, Sarah will be able to give us first-hand insights into the types of challenges faced by small accounting firms and the strategies they've adopted to help build healthier and more satisfying working environments. And last but not least, we have Jennifer Fry. Jen is the director of WorkSafe Victoria's WorkWell program. Oh, sorry, I forgot to welcome you, Sarah Lawrence. Welcome, Sarah. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Andrew.
Jumping ahead here, racing too far. I know that I've got Carol on with the whip cracking, so I just have to keep moving. Jennifer Fry. Jen is the director of WorkSafe Victoria's WorkWell program, aimed at supporting employers to prevent mental health injury and promote safe and mentally healthy workplaces by providing access to knowledge sharing, funding opportunities and resources. Jen will be able to talk about the situations and circumstances that are likely to contribute to stress and burnout amongst organisations across all industries and the general steps that organisations should take to manage these psychosocial hazards. So let's get into the questions. Just to let you know, audience, we haven't got a huge amount of time. We've designated 4 minutes per question. There is a bit of leeway, panelists. So if you want to add a few more words, then do that, but just keep it to few if you could, please. Okay, Sarah Lawrence, your first cab off the rank. As a small business owner operating in the accounting and finance sector, can you talk about the types of challenges you and your company face and the extent to which these impact on your ability to build a mentally healthy workplace?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So I think it's safe to say the last couple of years for our industry has been pretty challenging. Yeah, I think we've been dealing with burnout, we've been dealing with the impacts and the lasting impacts of COVID and what that's meant for smaller businesses as well. What we've seen with our clients is that when they get stressed, they naturally come to us when there's like that kind of financial strain on them. So we've had, our team members have also been kind of pushed into that role, that advisory role, where they've had to have those kind of conversations around not just about their business, but also their mental health as well. For the most part, our industry is very burnt out. We've seen a lot of accountants move out of the industry in the last couple of years. It's just been too much for them. We work long hours. We're a service-based industry. We bill on time for the most part, and we're also dealing with a massive talent shortage in the industry at the moment, and have so for the last 18 months. So, when you kind of put all of those factors together, what you come up with is, potentially long days and long weeks for team members and yourself, stressed out clients that have got their own challenges in that space as well. And, it's a perfect cocktail of stressed out, burned out team members and clients. So, yeah, so it's been challenging. I think, however, the bright moment of the last couple of years is it has allowed a lot of us to look at our businesses and our teams and go, this is not good enough. This is no way to live. We need to reset, the narrative with our businesses and with our clients so that we get that balance back in our life. So, yeah, it's been challenging. I think like I said, it has made a lot of us refocus on what matters to our business, making sure that our team members are looked after, focusing on our team members first and foremost, and also focusing on as business owners. It's very easy to focus on clients at times, your team members, and then forget you in the mix as well. So that's kind of been our focus in the last couple of years, making sure we get that balanced approach to making sure that, we have happy and healthy team members to the most part, and clients as well.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, really interesting. And there are challenges there that I just wouldn't have thought of, I suppose, Sarah. And you're right about being in the service industry, and you are at the beck and call of the labour market that's out there, and like all service organisations, that there's no doubt that they will be struggling.
Yeah.
So that's good to hear, and thanks for those comments. Jen, just in terms of WorkSafe's perspective and what they see as the common challenges experienced by organisations, regardless of size and industry type, what can you see are those major challenges? And also, could you describe to our audience the type of psychosocial risks that are often found in organisations?
Look, thanks, Andrew, and thanks very much for inviting me to be on this illustrious panel today. And also, can I just acknowledge that I'm actually standing at the moment on Wadawurrung country, so I acknowledge the traditional owners. And as far as your question, I might go backwards if that's all right, and just start with let's explain the words, because I think we use really big words in this space. We use the words of psychosocial hazards. And we know that that's a really broad term, and it can be a bit confusing. So I think it's probably useful to really break that down first. Look, simply it's the things that are caused by work. So anything in the design of work or the management of work or systems of work, that if they're not managed well, they lead to stress or to a negative psychological response, which can then lead to psychological or physical harm. So when we're talking about psychosocial hazards, we're talking about these things, and you can see them on the screen. So these are the work-related factors, the things that cause stress. So, we've got low job control, we've got low job role clarity, so people not knowing what they're meant to be doing, poor workplace relations, exposure to occupational violence or exposure to trauma. So all of these are the things that cause work-related psychological harm. And they're the things that we can manage. And so we're going to talk about that as we go through this webinar. And look, the next part of your question is, what are we hearing at WorkSafe Victoria? And look, interestingly, what we're hearing from both large business and small business is that their experience isn't as different as what sometimes we might think. We actually are seeing both large and small business really grappling with how to assess these psychosocial hazards and how to manage them. And so what we absolutely know is that we really need to be very clear and give very clear guidance on how to do this. And I guess that's what we're really on about today. Small businesses, what we're finding is that they possibly do have greater barriers, as Sarah just said, and that's because they don't necessarily have the specialist expertise within their business. So the owner, as Sarah's rightly, identified, they are the scheduler, they are the human resource person, they are the OHS person, and of course, if you don't have time and resources, often it's the managing of occupational health and safety that just is seen as too hard. Large business, yes, they possibly do have more capacity, but we're still finding that we need to go back to the basics around, what are these psychosocial hazards? How can they be seen within an occupational health and safety context, and how to actually manage them? And I guess that's what we're on about, to try and make this as simple and as logical to workplaces.
Yeah, and the task has really come to the fore, Jen, because of the new legislation that's come into effect in the last 12 months. We know in New South Wales, Tasmania, WA, they've all introduced regulations dealing specifically with psychosocial hazards. Queensland has come on board just at the beginning of April. We know that the other states and territories jurisdictions are going to follow suit in the coming months. And I suppose the question then is that, could you share with us what businesses should be considering in relation to these legislative changes? How should they respond?
Yeah, look, thanks, Andrew. And you're right, across Australia, each state, we still do have the basic in all of our laws that impose an obligation on workplaces to prevent harm, and that does include psychological harm. So some states, as you said, have gone as far as developing regulations and codes of practice to try and give more guidance to workplaces. But the bottom line is that we all share the same common approach on the need to prevent, address, and promote health and safety at work. And this approach, for people who've had any exposure to occupational health and safety, it's the same approach for psychological hazards as it is for physical hazards. So I guess this little diagram on screen really, you know, consultation is around the outside. Now what that means is talk with your staff at every point along the way. And then it's, you know, identifying your hazards. So going back to that list that I had on the previous slide is actually working with your staff to identify what those hazards are and then assessing them. And how do you assess them? You know, it's again talking to your staff. How much of an issue is it within your workplace? For some workplaces, you know, exposure to occupational violence, that might be the #1 hazard that you really need to work on. Whereas in other workplaces, like Sarah was talking about, it might actually be workload. So it's working out, you know, with those hazards, what are the ones that are really a risk to your workers, and you'll only know that by talking, and then it's putting in management practices in place. So that's where you dig down and say, well, what are the things that we can do in the design of our work that's actually going to address those risks? So this risk management approach is pretty much the same as you do with a physical risk, but it's using those psychosocial hazards as the factors that you use this same approach with. So this process, make sure that you do comply with your duties under your state's OHS legislation, but it gives you a framework just to make sure that you know that you are doing the right thing, you're looking after your staff, and you are actually making your workplace mentally healthier.
Thanks for that, Jen. Yeah, and it's a great framework. It's as you say, it's one that's quite ubiquitous in terms of its application across Australia. And from what I know, Tony, if you could just help us out here, a very similar sort of process exists in New Zealand. Is that the case? We've got New Zealand audience members here. Can you give us an understanding of what's happening there?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Yeah, it's fairly similar. So New Zealand's Health and Safety Act of 2015 talks about the need to ensure, so far as reasonably practicable, workers and their people are not exposed to mental health and safety risks arising from the business. So again, mental, psychological is included. That's something that's been added into the legislation over the last decade, 15 years ago or so in Australia. And I'm not sure when it came in New Zealand, but that's a key feature that psychological health, mental health is on a par with physical health. And that's true in New Zealand and in Australia. In New Zealand, however, they're not at the stage yet, as far as I know, of having specific codes of practice or specific hazard legislation and standards. But what an employer should do is rely on best practice, and that can be found in the recent ISO standard from 2021 that 45003 rolls right off the tongue, which is about psychosocial hazards and their control. And there's also other really good guidance, international guidance. The Canadian standards on psychological health and safety at work are another example, and there are others that as a business owner, you can choose your version of best practice, and you'll need to justify that if you were called upon by the regulator. But New Zealand is pretty active in this space. They've just done a big national survey on psychosocial working conditions run by WorkSafe New Zealand. And I think the link to the results of that survey is in the materials at the end for those who are interested. So that's sort of like a baseline psychosocial hazard assessment, if you will, at a national level. That's probably enough to say about New Zealand for the moment.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. And just on that too, just with that link, we're going to go to a couple of slides towards the end of today's webinar where we'll identify where there are resources and help support available to businesses, to organisations who are looking to become much more active on this front. And yes, they will be, as I mentioned at the outset of today's webinar, they'll be made available. These slides will be made available to you, and of course you can go to those links in your own time. Okay, Sarah Cotton, we haven't heard from you yet, but here we go. How do you work with organisations to develop fit for purpose mental health strategies?
Sure, Andrew. I think maybe I might take a back step just to.
Sorry.
That's
Sorry.
okay. That's okay. No worries.
Can I just say, I've just realised that I've jumped ahead of my schedule.
No worries.
Getting a little bit too...
I'm happy to jump there, but did you want me to still talk about what we're seeing around burnout and exhaustion globally?
Yes, exactly.
I think it really speaks lovely to what Sarah and Jen have already been talking about.
Brilliant.
Right. Excellent.
Thanks.
So if we just go to the next slide, I've just prepared a few slides. I don't know about anyone else in the audience, but a picture tells 1,000 words, and I really like to learn by looking. So just, I guess, reiterating where Sarah and Jen have travelled to this afternoon is we know that people's tanks are pretty empty off the back of the last few years, and we see those trends globally. We also see those trends both across Australia and New Zealand. Look, I won't go into all of these stats in a fine-tooth comb, but what I would like to draw the audience's attention to today are a couple of things. We can see there certainly that exhaustion and the high levels of exhaustion that we're seeing are feeding into some of those trends that we're seeing around the Great Resignation, Great Reset, quiet quitting. I'm sure many of the trends that we've read about in the modern media. There's a few demographics that are important to highlight that are showing higher signs of burnout and exhaustion. Women in particular, young workers, and small business owners are another sort of demographic to call out there. So I might just move on to the next slide, just to be able to really talk about why it's so important to be able to address exhaustion early. Interestingly, before the pandemic hit back in 2019, the World Health Organization actually included burnout as a syndrome of workplace stress that hasn't been well managed. It actually came into the International Classification of Diseases even before the pandemic hit. So it was quite good timing, actually, because we're certainly seeing a lot of that across our workplaces across the globe. But the important thing I guess I wanted to talk about, Andrew, is that as organisations and as workplaces, no matter what our size, you know, if people's tanks are pretty empty and we're seeing these high levels of exhaustion, we've got this incredible opportunity to, as it says there in the quote, actually prevent, you know, high scales of burnout. And we're already seeing some of that already manifesting. So I guess what I wanted to say is just, you know, if we look at the definition of burnout, we know that it includes these three dimensions: emotional exhaustion, a sense of isolation and irritability, where we start seeing people sort of become a bit more detached or a bit cynical from the work that they do. And then that feeds into this, I guess, increased sense of actually really doubting their sense of being able to accomplish or be efficient in the work that they actually do. So I think, Andrew, this is an amazing opportunity for businesses to really start looking at how we can address you know, in this you know, what Tony's going to talk about in, you know, addressing the three-pronged approach. So if we just move on to the next slide, because I think this really speaks to what Jen was saying, is that when we look at the hazards that are feeding into these high levels of burnout and exhaustion, I mean, this is just one study, but we can see already in this study, and I can see Jen nodding on my screen, that there's no surprises here, is there, Jen, that we're seeing, you know, no work-life separation, high workloads, job insecurity, lack of support, and lack of control being, I guess, some of those factors that are feeding in to these high levels of exhaustion. And then finally, Andrew, just in the last part of answering your question, I would probably just say on the next slide, I think it's important for all of us to be aware of what are those signs of an empty tank, because the earlier that we can identify these signs in ourselves and in our people, the earlier we can actually put in place early interventions to address that. So, Andrew, I'm not sure if it's helpful for the audience listening in today, but really it's a great opportunity, just like those lights flash on our dashboard in the car when our car needs a service and tells us that something's going a bit wrong. I think these early signs can be really great at just getting us to think about, oh, you know, my left shoulder's locking up again, or I might be eating a bit more chocolate than I normally do, or, you know, maybe I'm not tapping into my social networks as much as I do. You know, are these signs that I need to be mindful of? So I hope, Andrew, that's just given some food for thought for the audience around those high levels of exhaustion and burnout that we are actually seeing.
Yeah, absolutely, Sarah. And just in terms of the performance indicators that you've got there, in your experience in dealing with organisations, to what extent are organisations sort of tuned in to look out for those signs? Or to what extent do they actually link them to the possibility that they may have higher levels of burnout and exhaustion amongst their workforce?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think historically probably not so good, but I think in light of the increasing levels of exhaustion and burnout that we're seeing, I think we are seeing it really impacting on productivity, particularly levels of concentration and focus. A lot of people are finding it hard because their tanks are so empty to actually be able to maintain the same levels of productivity that perhaps they have been able to do in the past. And so workplaces are needing to address that, Andrew, because the demands are not going anywhere. The complexity of the world that we work in, the level of disruption and change that we're operating under is only going to continue to increase.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for those fascinating insights there, Sarah. Okay, so far, let's just take stock of where we're up to here. So far, we've talked about the current state of play and wellbeing at work from the experience of a small business owner, as well as from an OH&S regulator's perspective, and also from a mental health practitioner perspective. Let's now move to what workplaces can do to create and maintain a culture of wellbeing in the workplace. And when we talk about culture, we talk about what are our values of an organisation and what do we value. And certainly mental health and workplace mental health needs to be high up there on the list of values that organisations subscribe to and try to promote within their organisation. Clearly, there should be a focus not just on minimising psychosocial risks, but also on promoting the positives and taking those proactive steps to ensure that we organise work and manage our people in a way that brings out the best in them. So we're back to you, Tony. Onto this term, the integrated approach. Can you just unpack just exactly what that means and just how it can be used in a work setting?
Sure, happy to do that. I think the next slide has a bit of a picture of it. There we go. So this represents an effort on the part of myself, Andrew, and some other collaborators some 10 years ago to distill a huge complexity of advice around workplace mental health. So the principles base and the evidence base can come from medicine, from public health, from mock health and safety, from organizational behavior, management sciences, epidemiology, and more. And so what we tried to do was to take what we knew globally and distill it into 3 action areas that would complement and reinforce each other. And those are to prevent harm at work, promote the positive of work, and respond to problems when they manifest at work, mental health problems. And so to unpack each of those, preventing harm is really the area that we've been talking about the most so far, with Jennifer's comments and also Sarah's. It's really promoting strategies to address work-related risks to mental health, to manage workload, to improve job control, to minimize poor support at work. And then this is both an ethical and a legal mandate, both in Australia and New Zealand. The second action area, promoting the positive, is about promoting the positive aspects of work, things such as participatory job redesign to emphasize worker strengths or preferences, and then positive capacities, workers' positive capacities. So you hear a lot in workplaces about resilience, worker resilience and mindfulness programs and so on. Those are great, but it's also about organizational resilience that would be a positive capacity that's equally important. So these types of strategies pursue positive outcomes like well-being, engagement at work, as opposed to deficit-based outcomes, mental illness, burnout. And so these are not, strictly speaking, ethically or legally mandated at work. However, they do provide great buffers against stressors and psychosocial hazards. And we've been able to show empirically that when there are positive features of the work, those tend to mitigate or blunt the effect of job stressors at work in protecting mental health. The third area is responding to mental health problems when they manifest at work. Now, these problems, as they manifest, could be related to work, or they could be brought to work by things from outside of work, or a combination of both. That's probably most often what goes on. And there, the range of possible strategies can be as simple as checking in on people, how are you going today, in a genuine way, all the way up to helping people to access mental health treatments for serious mental illness. So there's a massive spectrum of activities there. In a workplace, it's usually about promoting a workplace that is low in stigma and has an educated workforce about how to seek help, how to offer help to other workers. These are usually referred to as mental health literacy programs. Mental health first aid is something that fits in this area of work, which is the ability to respond when somebody shows signs of distress, and manage that person until professional services can arrive in the same way that one would put a bandage on a bleeding wound before the person is attended to by a paramedic, for example. So there's that's a very quick tour, if you will, of the integrated approach. And the key thing here is that these are rather generic action areas, and they take very different forms in very different contexts. And on the next slide, we can show you how the Counting on You program tries to enact these principles. First, in terms of preventing harm, it's about upskilling business advisors in relationship building, and that can improve their job control, their skill discretion. It builds skills. Lots of job stress interventions can simply be about helping people to do their jobs better, giving them the support they need, giving them the skills that they need. It also can improve ability to provide services to clients, and that can reduce business advisor job stress. Both the relationship building training and the mental health first aid work in that way. I'll skip along through, not read through all of the slide here, but to illustrate that promoting the positive aspects, improve business relationships from the relationship training can benefit the advisor in terms of job satisfaction, job rewards, meaningfulness of work, as well as clients. And then responding to problems, mental health first aid, as described in the previous slide, is a central activity in the response aspect here. And in addition, relationship building enhances client willingness to discuss mental health problems and provide opportunity for business advisors to facilitate help seeking for those persons. So that's the general big picture of the integrated approach, and then how it applies here in the Counting on You strategy. Thanks, Andrew. That's it for me for the moment.
That's great, Tony, and I really like the way that you've applied it to the program that a lot of people out there have had firsthand experience in undertaking. So great to hear you unpack that in that work, to make sure that we note that in that next paper that we're writing, Tony.
Yes.
And back to Sarah Cotton. Sarah, sorry about asking this question well ahead of time.
No worries, Andrew.
I'm going to ask it again now, so you've had time to think about it. How do you work with organisations to develop fit-for-purpose mental health strategies?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So if we look at it across how we work across the integrated framework, which Tony has explained so well, if we look at the preventing harm piece first, I think one of the pieces that we're really proud to deliver at the moment is with Safe Work New South Wales. We actually offer one-on-one coaching, Andrew, with small business owners and not-for-profits in New South Wales, where we come alongside largely the small business owner often and actually help them to be able to look at what's going on in their workplace, to help them identify those psychosocial hazards that Shen spoke of, so that they can really make sure that they're building a really mentally healthy workplace at that high level. And then also, Andrew, another example is when we work with companies across Australia and New Zealand, developing really sound policies that, take that really proactive approach of identifying potential, areas across, people's life cycles, whether that's working parents, early career, retirement, and building really sound policies to make sure that we minimise harm across those seasons. And then promoting the positive, I think two great examples there. Some work that we're doing with Ange Martin and Sarah Dawkins on psychological capital, that really looks to build, I love this acronym, it's the HERO acronym. It stands for hope, efficacy, resilience and optimism. And we've been really stepping in largely after the pandemic, actually, helping individuals and teams really be able to bolster the hero in their teams and individuals, so that their resources are really strong to be able to really manage, I guess, all the demands that are being thrown at us post the pandemic. And then just our transition coaching that we do every day at Transitioning Well. I think, supporting people in transition really promotes the positive, because essentially what you're doing is you're giving people these skills to really harness the strengths and the resources that they bring to transition, so that they can really protect their mental health and wellbeing as they navigate, all that life throws at us in that messy intersection that you referred to earlier, Andrew. And then I think the last one that just speaks to that responding to problems, we at Transitioning Well offer specialised EAP, particularly for small business, and particularly in areas that are often quite tricky. For example, our pregnancy loss and infertility support is a great example of responding when life gets tricky, and we know that that can have a really profound impact upon how we work as well. So having really tailored response is so critical, isn't it? Rather than just sort of standard approaches to being able to respond. Yeah. Thanks, Andrew.
Okay. All right. Now, is there another slide there, Anjali? The next one, it should be free resources that are available here in Australia.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So listen, there are lots of resources out there in this area, and I'm not going to go into too much detail about them. Certainly, I've worked in this space as a researcher and also as a practitioner for, I hate to say it, but almost 3 decades now, and it's just amazing the information and the knowledge that's available now compared to what we had previously. We've gone ahead in leaps and bounds, and I think that the legislative changes that we've seen come into all the jurisdictions in Australia, or will be with some of them, that's making huge inroads into providing organisations with the capacity to be able to deal with psychosocial hazards in a very meaningful and effective way. So we've got the workplace mental health coaching for small businesses, which is available from the New South Wales government. There's a link there. As I mentioned before, these slides will be made available to all the attendees, so you can have a look at these sites in your own time. We've got the Career Transition Series, Have Your Say, the National Mental Health Commission. Of course, they've been very productive on the workplace front, looking at workplace mental health. And then we've got the Australian Perinatal Workplace Wellbeing Program, the Parent Well program, which is also available for workplaces. So they're the resources that are available in Australia. They are free, but they are very well informed, evidence-based strategies that all organisations can apply. If we now go to the next slide, Anjali, Tony mentioned before the work that New Zealand have been doing in the workplace mental health space. And certainly if you look at the resources that are available, for example, the First Steps program is designed to support business stakeholders, including owners, leaders, employees, in developing resilience, promoting wellness, and acquiring the necessary skills to successfully navigate through periods of change and uncertainty. They provide a variety of free mental health wellbeing resources, podcasts, videos, and links to practitioners specifically for small business owners, and importantly, are currently offering New Zealander business impacted by recent weather events, one-on-one mental health and wellbeing support packages. So certainly have a look at that if you fit into that category, and hopefully you're able to get the resources that you need. There's also the Mental Health Foundation in New Zealand, which is well recognised for doing leading work in the workplace mental health space. It's another great resource for employers and managers, and they provide free workplace mental health programs, online training, resources and campaigns. Sarah Cotton touched on the importance of having good policies in place, and there's a third website there, the Workplace Policy Builder, which is being developed to help small to medium-sized enterprises create their own health and wellbeing policies. This tool guides you through the steps to create a variety of policies tailored to your workplace, or can use it as a tool to see how your policies stack up if there is any room for improvement. There's another slide there, which unfortunately we haven't got time to go into detail, which is refers or captures the work that's undertaken by the New Zealand government's health and safety lead. So certainly have a look at the resources that are available there. Sarah Lawrence, it's been a little while since we've spoken to you. I've got a couple of questions for you. And the first one is, we know that you're a Counting on You graduate. Can you explain just how the program has been beneficial for you? That's it, if it has been beneficial for you, not just in terms of your clients, because we know that counting on you is helping to equip business advisors help their clients in relation to their mental health, but also in terms of how you support your team and yourself. That's a long-winded question, but hopefully you're able to answer it.
Thanks, Andrew. So I think first and foremost, the training for me on a personal level, it was really nice to be with other business owners and hear about their challenges as well. It's always nice to know that you're not the only one out there doing it tough, or having these kind of experiences. So I think from that perspective, it was really good. I think the other big benefit from the training was really just understanding the language that was needed when those conversations do crop up with your team members and also with your clients, and being able to provide that framework off the back of it. I think for most people I think we're all aware that, we can see burnout around us with our team and ourselves. And I think, what we do really well as an industry is also, well, give us a framework, give us a structure, and we'll execute it really well. And I think going through the training really allowed me to kind of lean on that framework and, have better conversations with my team members. So, being able to look at those trigger points when we were having conversation, hearing those moments where when I went, oh, okay, let me remember the training. Okay, these is the resources that I can kind of point them in the direction to go and find some assistance, or this is what this potentially looks like. So it was, I would encourage anyone, honestly, that's on the call at the moment, if you haven't done it, or somebody in your team hasn't done it, please actively go and look at the resources, because it has, I haven't met an accountant out there in the last couple of years that hasn't looked at these resources and hasn't had some kind of benefit from it. And even if it isn't you, because you're really time poor, nominating somebody in your team to do that kind of training has been really beneficial as well. But it's about confidence, it's about being confident and being able to listen to those conversations that are coming at us anyway from clients and team members, and being able to say, okay, well, how can I best approach this conversation? How can I make sure that the advice or the direction that I'm pointing people in is actually going to land in a way that's going to actually make a difference to them, and help them have a more balanced perspective at work and whatnot. So yeah, it's been a great training program, and one I thoroughly tell everyone on the call to go out and have a look at and potentially do themselves.
That word balance that you just mentioned then, Sarah, we've had lots of discussions with business advisors, in particular accountants and financial planners, bookkeepers, etc. And as you know, they've just been completely swamped, for a long time now, and burning the candle at both ends, but are still incredibly committed to their clients and making sure that they do the utmost to be able to help them out. How do you, and I have no doubt that your firm will be up against the same sort of challenges. How do you work with your staff to make sure that you give them that scope for for that, having that autonomy and doing the best job that they can do, but at the same time recognizing, hey, you need a life outside of work, you've got other responsibilities and commitments, etc. How do you help them to be able to keep that perspective and get that balance in an environment where you are often under the pump, as they say?
Yeah, so we're all remote, and we have been from 7 years ago. So we're a fully distributed team. So we have team members up the east coast of Australia. And we really do promote a bit of radical flexibility in our work lives. So and what I mean by that is not doing 100 hours a week, but just at whatever time you want. But, looking at your week and looking what else is going on in your life and making sure that you build out your week in alignment with that. So we're predominantly women with young families. So, I know that I start work late most days so that I can make sure that I do the daycare drop off. I know that I've got, another team member that stops for half a day so that she can go and see her parents for a couple of hours. And so that's really built into the DNA of the business, and making sure that people understand that, for me, and this comes from the top of the the top of the business. You know, as long as the work gets done, you're happy and clients are happy, then I'm happy to give you that flexibility, and I'm happy, you know, to build that trust into the business, you know. And I think, you know, if I trust them, then they trust me, and you know, hopefully we build a culture from there. But you know, it's worked really well. It's worked really well, and people seek us out because they know that that's a kind of environment that they're going to be working in. I don't want people working over 5 o'clock in the afternoon or anything like that. And again, but that starts with me and being a good example at the top, and making sure that I'm not doing one thing and then promoting something else as well to my team members. So yeah, so it's worked really well. And you know, and hopefully what that's done for my team members is really kind of you know, realigned them and got that balance back for them, and made them not just focus on the work, but also their lives as well.
Excellent work, Sarah. It's admirable what you're doing there, and yeah, it's great to see. Hopefully, there are more organisations out there taking the same approach. But I'm sure just, you know, hearing that you're doing that, then that hopefully will give other organisations, if they don't have that approach at the moment, then they may give it more consideration in the future. Jennifer, I just wanted to circle back to you now. Could you talk about WorkSafe's WorkWell initiative and how our audience could make use of the program?
Yeah, look, absolutely love to, Andrew. And I think what WorkWell has been doing is been trying to share this learning that we've been talking about today across Victorian workplaces. So look, a little bit of background. WorkWell has been running for 6 years. And it is Victorian Government program, and it's in partnership with WorkSafe and Department of Health. And I guess the reasons with Department of Health is because we know if we can have mentally healthy workplaces, that leads to mentally healthy communities. So it's so important that we actually really invest in our workplaces. And I also have to say thanks to Tony that it's been strongly influenced in its design by the integrated approach. So we've you know, leaned very heavily on the research that's come out of your area. So thank you, Tony, very much. Look, and the body of work really aims to support employers in Victoria to prevent and address mental injury and promote safe, mentally healthy workplaces. I think we lean more in terms of the integrated model into the prevent because we are the regulator. But that's not to say that we certainly don't have resources that certainly speak to promote and address, because we do know that sadly people do get injured psychologically by work. So look, WorkWell has been large. It's been $50 million over this 6 years. Sarah, you know, we can talk to the program that Sarah ran, which was really looking at that transition phase for people who are at different transition points in their life and their impact on work. And we've partnered with almost 1,000 organisations. Oh. And what that means is that we've been able to really collaboratively problem solve, I think. So we've put money out there to industry, to unions, to not-for-profits, to consultants, to say we've got this really wicked problem, and how do we problem solve together some really good outcomes and some practical resources for workplaces to use. Look, if all's going, the technology gods are going to help us out. I'm going to share the actual WorkWell website, and we can actually see what we're talking about. So let's see if that works okay. So our partners, can you let me know, someone from the panel, when you can see it? You can see it, great. So this is the WorkWell website. You can just go to it, worksafe.vic.gov.au/WorkWell. And what you can see to start off with is some case studies from 3 different projects that we funded. And this one here is the one that Sarah Cotton's team ran. So have a look at that one. But if we scroll down, you can see that you can actually get to our 3 main bodies of work. the WorkWell toolkit, which I'll show you in a minute, and the projects, which were called the improvement funds. You can go to each of those projects and have a look at what they've been doing, as well as the 5 learning networks that have been run around across Victoria. And really just to introduce our new body of work, we're now focused on prevention of work-related gendered violence, including sexual harassment. And look, go in there and have a good look there, because we have got funding. Applications are open right at the moment to use this same model of problem solving with industry and unions to really address this really difficult problem as well. And look, we want everyone to please subscribe, because that means that you'll get up-to-date information. But if we quickly flick to the toolkit, it just will give you a little bit of information about the toolkit, and then you'll be able to choose which size business really fits your situation. And if we click on the small business, you'll then give you a few options that you want to go to. If you want to really just get started, start here. If you want more information on your legal obligations, go here. But if you want to go to a particular topic, there's a whole range of topics. So we'll have a quick look at prevent bullying in your workplace. And I won't go through the whole action, but you can just see what you'll get here. You'll get some basic information on you know, how preventing bullying is good for your business, talking to your staff, consulting your staff, and then looking at your policy. And there's some examples of some policy templates, and there's a bit of a policy checklist. If you've already got a policy, check it out and make sure that it's most up to date. And then some ideas about considering social media, which is obviously really important in prevention of bullying. And of course, always with all of our actions is don't forget to review and keep improving, because we're never going to have it always right. So it's that constant improvement. So with these topics, you know, there'll be videos. There's also this lovely video which, you know, a little bit of humour, but please have a look at that as well. Look, I'll stop sharing that site. I think, have I gone out of it now? Great. And hand back to Andrew.
Okay, thanks for that, Jen. Just in time too. We're at, what is it, 1:53, only 7 minutes to go and counting down. We've got some questions in the chat that I'm now going to direct to various panelists. And the first one is, this is for Sarah Cotton. Sarah, the question is, it's in 2 parts. Please explain more about burnout related to COVID protocols, and do the protocols like using masks, keeping distance in a workplace affect burnout? And then the second part is, what's the best approach when one employee impacts on a range of other colleagues and stakeholders negatively, and oblivious to that with the intention of maintaining a healthy dialogue and mental health outcome with that employee?
Crikey, what have we got? 6 minutes and counting.
That's right.
Alrighty,
maybe if you go for the first one first, yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Look, I'm happy to give 2 high-level responses to both. I think they're great questions. I think the first one with the COVID regulations and the impact that had across burnout, I think what we saw from a psychological perspective is that our surge capacity as humans was really depleted. Like, we're really good at, you know, rallying when a crisis happens, and, you know, being able to be agile in a business and do all the things that were required with the COVID protocols. But, you know, once that continued to happen, there was one thing after the next. So there was such an accumulation of demands upon businesses of all sizes that we were becoming just so depleted. There was no recovery time, particularly in that 3 years. And so I think that explains why we're seeing those high levels of burnout and exhaustion. I don't know if anyone else in the panel wants to add to that, but that's how I would sort of respond to that one.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and certainly you do certainly sympathise with people who have been working in.
Oh, so tough. So tough.
Yeah, and it's still going. If you go
still
to hospital
going.
now,
That's the thing, isn't it? The legacy of it continues, you know, and the uncertainty continues, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'll put this second question, maybe to the other Sarah Lawrence here. It's a bit of a curly one, Sarah, but I think you've got the peace of mind to be able to deal with it in a positive way. Can you answer this question? What's the best approach when one employee impacts on a range of other colleagues and stakeholders negatively and oblivious to that, with the intention of maintaining a healthy dialogue and mental health outcome with that employee?
Yeah, so anything like this with employees, it's all about communication and really positive communication, and making sure you get in front of it really quickly. Make sure you have a chat to that employee, sit them down, find out what's going on. I mean, in my own experience, when I look at my business and people are stressed out or they're having these moments with other team members or with clients, there's usually something more going on, and it's not at a business level. So it's really sitting down and actively listening and going, what's happening, what's going on in your life, and how can I support you with that? And then offering them a framework off the back of that around, okay, well, here are the pain points. How do we get you where we need to get you? These are the issues that have come up with other team members or clients, and how can we work through that with you? I think it's really important then to not just stop that conversation and just let them fly, but just actively check in with them, check in at an individual level and also a team level. But, you know, people want to feel supported. People want to feel like, you know, they're being communicated with and they're being supported. And so, you know, whatever you can do as an owner to be able to sit down and communicate and work through with them on that is how I would approach it and how I have approached it in the past in those situations.
Okay, thanks for that, Sarah. Yeah, it sounds very sound approach to me. We've got two questions for Jen. I'll go with I think the second one just might give us an opportunity to tease out some of the really key points about the management of psychosocial hazards. The question, Jen, is what is the number one mistake you see in businesses as it relates to the management of psychosocial hazards?
Look, I think it's really personalising them. So I think it's where people blame instead of trying to really understand what the root causes of the problem are. And I guess if people can take that personalised approach out of it and dig down to, well, what are the psychosocial hazards? So use that framework to really try and unpick what is it in the design of the work that's caused this relationship to break down. Because it's so much better to try and address the root cause of the problem, and it's often the symptoms, which is that becomes the interpersonal conflict. So I think that's where sometimes people make mistakes. It's you know, and I think it's human nature as well to just respond to to a negative human interaction, but trying as much as you can as a manager and a supervisor to lift above that, and really try and explore the root causes, because then you can address that, and then that means that other people are not going to be negatively impacted by it.
Good.
Can I add a little to that, Andrew?
Yes, you can, Tony.
Yeah.
Jump in.
Yeah. So I totally agree with you, Jen. Making it an individual problem is problematic. But another thing that's really common is I'm not sure if there are figures for this, Jen. You could tell us, but most businesses don't identify and assess psychosocial hazards. And you know, so there's sort of the step one is missing from the cycle that you illustrated, and that's another big one for those business owners listening. We're not talking about going deep and a massive project, but you need to assess your work environment and your organization for psychosocial hazards as a starting point.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so that's, you know, trying to go back to that OHS sort of framework. And how do you do that? You've got to talk with your staff. You've got to understand how people are feeling, and then, but pull it right back to those psychosocial hazards, so you can then, you know, they're things, they're real things. Just like, you know, working at height is a real thing. So actually really try and take the ambiguity out of it so that you really assess them. Thanks, Tony.
Okay, listen, it's smack bang on 2 o'clock, everyone. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. But listen, I want to give a big thank you to our panelists, Tony, Sarah Cotton, Sarah Lawrence, Jen. Many valuable insights there. We're really grateful for the time that you put into planning for today's session, and then actually getting online and responding to my questions and the questions from the audience. Speaking of the audience questions, we haven't been able to get to all of them. I apologise for that, but we'll make sure that a Deakin staff member gets in contact with you and we follow that up. Just remember to feel free to sign up for the Counting on You newsletter. If you just want to get more of an understanding about the program, you can check it out via that newsletter and also via our socials, and stay updated as much as you can. Also, just lastly, keep an eye out for a follow-up email from us with a recording of today's session and the resources, those really important resources that we mentioned on those few slides. It's been great being able to talk to our panelists today, to ask those questions and to take a deep dive into psychosocial hazards and what it means to create safer, fairer and healthier working environments. Thank you very much, everyone, and look forward to crossing paths at maybe one other webinar further down the track. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.